Wagner's ranks as they made their way into Rostov. While in St. Petersburg, police raided Wagner's headquarters. Mike Lappel, Al Jazeera.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin says the move by Wagner forces is treason and said decisive action will be taken.
Жизни и безопасности.
We will defend our country, we will defend our nation, we will defend our citizens against the threats we face today. Some people are trying to use their interests against our country. We need to make sure that we are fighting in Ukraine for the sake of our country and be sure that traitors must not be there. A lot of people have sacrificed their lives for Russia, and those that are trying to sow rebellion and create chaos will fail ultimately.
But Wagner chief Evgeny Prigozhin says Russia's president is mistaken and Wagner fighters are patriots, not traitors.
The planes that leave for combat work in Russia's offensive against Ukraine are leaving as normal. There aren't any problems. Medical aircraft are leaving. There are no problems. All we did was take the aerodrome under control so that the attack aviation did not strike us, but strike Ukrainians. The main commanding center for Russia's offensive in Ukraine is functioning as normal. There aren't any problems at all. Not one officer has been pried away from their work. So when the Russian army tell you that the private military company Wagner has obstructed the work of the army, which resulted in things crumbling on the front, things will not crumble on the front because of this. When we came here to Rostov-on-Don, we reconfirmed a lot of new things. A huge amount of territories have been lost. Soldiers have been killed, 3-4 times more than what it says in documents shown to the top leadership.
OK, we're going to cross to Moscow to speak with Yulia Shapovalova, who's there for us. Yulia, you're joining us on the phone. Let's talk more about Evgeny Prigozhin's reaction to these accusations by President Putin. What's he been saying?
Yeah, sure. Well, basically, to the nation earlier on, Mr. Putin, Russia is fighting for its future and its identity, and that authorities in Russia will not allow the country to be divided. They will protect its people. And he also mentioned the conflict with Ukraine, saying that the entire Western military machine was directed against Russia. So Putin indeed called the situation in the country treason, saying that any internal unrest is a deadly threat to the state and to the people. And Prigozhin has now reacted to Putin's words about treason, saying that President was deeply wrong, that they are patriots, meaning, well, himself and his Wagner fighters, calling them patriots of their country. And he said that they would continue fighting for their country, they would continue fighting corruption, lie and bureaucracy in the country. So basically we're getting some official reactions here too. Well, from foreign ministry spokeswoman, for example, she said that unity within the country is needed now, and probably the same words that we heard from the former president Dmitry Medvedev. Also, it looks like a new form of expression of loyalty to Vladimir Putin and the Russian armed forces. On the Telegram and channels and other networks, officials in their accounts write that, well, they post their name, region and organization, saying that we are with the president. So basically, we also have some reports, some Telegram channels associated with the Wagner Group claim that there were clashes with the Ministry of Defense in the Voronezh region, and military correspondents there write about the work of aviation along the M4 highway, but we can't immediately verify those reports. Also, the investigative committee, the Russian investigative committee, has launched a criminal case against Prigozhin, and the FSB appealed to the fighters of the Wagner Group and urged them to detain Prigozhin. And earlier on, the head of Wagner called on his supporters to join the ranks of his military company and sort out the so-called chaos in the country, saying that was not a military coup, that was a march of justice.
Yulia, I'm just looking at some of the agency pictures that we're getting from the centre of Moscow at the moment, and it does actually seem to be fairly quiet there. But I do know that security has been stepped up across Russia. What have you been hearing?
Well, that's absolutely right. Some armoured military personnel carriers and other armoured vehicles could be seen in the streets of Moscow. But generally, you're right. People say that the capital looks pretty calm at the moment. But security measures have been tightened in Moscow, and not just in Moscow, in other regions of Russia too. And here, all the most important facilities have been taken under protection. There are also reports that all the public activities have been cancelled, and things like proms at schools and other venues have been postponed. By the way, I just forgot to mention, the Ministry of Defense earlier on also issued an official statement addressing fighters of the Wagner Group, saying that they had got involved in Prigozhin's criminal activities and participated in an armed rebellion. And, well, they shouldn't, actually. They also guaranteed everyone's safety if the fighters surrendered. And as we see, there are reports by state media outlets saying that some fighters returned to their initial positions as they have been asked by the army. Well, also, some publications of Prigozhin's, well, basically some sources that published Prigozhin's earlier statements, and, well, actually, and after we've seen his actions, since that, we haven't seen a lot of clashes between Wagner and the regular army. Basically, there are reports that the Wagner Group now controls the command center and a number of security and military facilities in Russia's southern city of Rostov, including an airfield. But according to reports, military planes there continue carrying out their missions. Also, according to some security services, well, the situation of uncertainty is going on in Voronezh, because some say that some command centers have also been captured by Wagner there, but those reports haven't been officially confirmed. Also, there have been pictures showing Prigozhin negotiating with two high-ranking army generals, Yunusbek Yevkurov and General Alexeyev, and they were warning Prigozhin about consequences of his actions. So basically, Prigozhin claimed that the Wagner forces had shot down a helicopter that opened fire on a civilian convoy, while other sources reported about two army helicopters firing at several Wagner vehicles in the Rostov region. But that information hasn't been officially confirmed either. So we do keep monitoring the developments here in Moscow.
Yulia, thank you very much indeed. That's Yulia Shapovalova talking to us from Moscow on the phone. Well, joining us now from Donetsk is Ali Hashim. Now, you're in Donetsk, you're across the border from Rostov-on-Don, where much of the activity is taking place. It is difficult at the moment, as we know, to get information out from Rostov-on-Don to find out what's going on. As far as you're aware, what's been happening?
Well, since this morning, the whole operation by Wagner was centralized in Rostov. The Wagner troops went into the city without any resistance, took control of the command center there. And as we saw and we heard also from Yulia, the commander of the Wagner group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, made a video or an audio response to the president over the speech. He stayed away from using harsh words towards the president, by, for example, saying that he is not saying the truth. However, he didn't really go directly to attack the president. And it's clear that he wants to keep kind of an association with the country or the establishment away from his food with the government or with the military commanders. Now, in Rostov, for now, what we know is that the Wagner are in control, also on the way to Voronezh. They have also some activities there. They posted a video of a photo of a helicopter that was hit. However, this needs to be confirmed. Also, other areas such as Lipetsk. This is another city to the north of Rostov that the Wagner troops also claim to have control of without any resistance. Now, since yesterday, Wagner's commander, Yevgeny Prigozhin, said that he is going to head towards Rostov because the defense minister launched what Wagner's commander claims is an attack on his troops from Rostov, and that he's going there for a kind of revenge. Now, how is this impacting the situation? Over here in Donetsk, there is nothing in the city. However, we've been hearing for the past hours bombardment around the city. The defense ministry also claimed that the Ukrainian forces are preparing for a counter-offensive in Bakhmut. And this is also part of the repercussions of what's happening. So the the Russian president is right now in front of really dangerous crossroad, either engaging with Wagner troops militarily, and this could pose a threat on the civil order and might ignite a civil war in the country, or accept whatever is Wagner is requesting, and this will undermine the military establishment of the country in the time of what Russia calls a special operation, and the weight of a war in Ukraine.
Yeah, Ali, you were saying there that Yevgeny Prigozhin had been staying away from criticizing President Putin. He has, in his most recent statement, said that nobody plans to turn themselves in on Putin's order, which does bring the two of them a bit closer. We're going to be coming back to you, of course, in the next couple of hours to find out what the latest developments. But for now, Ali Hashim, thank you very much. Well, there's been no pause in Russia's offensive in Ukraine. We're going to cross live to Jonah Hull in Kyiv. How is all of this being viewed in Kyiv, first of all?
Well, obviously, they'll be watching it extremely closely, not just the political leadership here in Kyiv, but the military leadership as well. We've had some comments from President Zelensky, who's taken to Telegram with a rather long post decrying overnight missile attacks on targets all over Ukraine, once again saying that it is all happening by the will of one man, and saying that Russia's weakness is now obvious. As long as Russia keeps its troops and mercenaries on our land, he says, the more chaos, pain and problems will come to it later. More specifically, though, comments from Mikhailo Podolyak, an advisor to President Zelensky, and we've heard lots of people suggesting that whatever does happen next in Russia could well happen very swiftly. That appears to be the view as well among the political leadership here. Mikhailo Podolyak talking about the next 48 hours and saying they will determine what he described as the new status in Russia, either a fully fledged civil war or a contractual transition of power or a temporary respite before the next stage of the fall of the Putin regime. Of course, they will not have any better idea than anyone else about what is going to happen next. Militarily, though, it could have much stronger bearings and ramifications on the process of the war itself, and the military analysts here will be watching very closely all of their sources, their satellite imagery and so on, to see what they can glean about what's happening in Rostov-on-Don. It is absolutely vital military centre for the war here. It is the base of the southern military district, which is operating and controlling almost all of the battlefield here in Ukraine. They'll be looking at ways in which that may be disrupted. They'll be looking at infrastructure that may be disrupted, routes of resupply and reinforcement for the forces in the security operation that is going on there. And they'll be looking specifically as well at points on the very long front line here in Ukraine, with a view to the counter-offensive that's been going on for several weeks now, probing Russia's defences at a number of points. They'll want to know, or try to understand, just how many of those Wagner mercenaries have been redeployed from positions that they have been holding and defending along the battlefield to mainland Russia, thinking of places like Bakhmut, big city in the east that was fought over specifically by Wagner mercenaries. They'll be looking to see whether little holes are exposed there for them to exploit, and they'll also, of course, be looking to see the composition of Russian forces along the front lines here. Perhaps not the first line of defence, but rear echelons. Is Russia needing to redeploy some of its key assets on the ground in Ukraine to support its attempt to see off Wagner mercenaries in Russia itself?
Jonah, just as you're talking to us, we can see behind you the workmen there who are beginning to clear up the debris. There have been airstrikes, haven't there, over the last few hours or so. Tell us about those.
Yeah, it's a pretty extraordinary scene here. You know, a reminder, as if any were needed, that there is very much a war still going on, and it is going on away from the front lines in the south and the east. Kyiv hit overnight by a barrage of missiles, some 20 cruise missiles fired at the capital. For the 8th time this month alone, air defences were able to bring all of them down, we are told, by the city military administration. But that creates debris in the air, and that debris's got to fall somewhere. And it appears that a large piece of missile debris, potentially containing payload unexploded, hit this high-rise apartment building, scything an enormous hole in 3 sides of it, igniting a fire across 3 stories. 3 people known to have died. Rescue workers believe there could be further victims, and Here where I'm standing, a big clear-up operation underway, an enormous debris field here, falling masonry, furniture from those apartments and so on, and an awful lot of people coming here to take a look.
Jonah, thank you very much. Jonah Hull in Kyiv. We're going to get a view from the front lines about these dramatic developments we've been talking about. Charles Stratford is joining us on the road to Bakhmut in eastern Ukraine. You've been in a village on the front line with some of the fighters there. Talk us through what you and the team have been seeing, not just there, of course, but obviously in the last couple of hours since all this stuff has been happening in Rostov-on-Don.
That's right, yeah, you join us on the road to Bakhmut, of course, that town that was taken control of by Russian forces in relative recent weeks, and a town that was taken control of with the fundamental role of the Wagner group. We know that, certainly according to Ukrainian forces, they're saying that since this counter-offensive has started, they're claiming to have made certain gains in trying to retake control of Bakhmut from the south, southeast and southwest, pushing north. But of course, this news that we're hearing now has potentially huge impact on this counter-offensive. And interestingly, we've been speaking to Ukrainian soldiers in this area. They're describing it as a big day for Ukraine. One soldier saying that they were now going to, in his words, exploit the chaos on the Russian side, or the Russian control side of the front line around Bakhmut, and hit Russian forces hard in that area. And we're already hearing reports, certainly on Telegram, that we cannot independently verify, of small gains being made in the last few hours or so. But as I say, we cannot independently verify that. What we can tell you, though, is that we have seen increased troop movement in this area this morning. We saw helicopters that are designed to carry troops to the front in this area. There's been a lot of heavy shelling as well, both incoming and outgoing, smoke rising to my right off camera. So yeah, the situation is very tense here, but the morale amongst the Ukrainian forces seems to have been buoyed by this news. Now, we've been looking at two separate points along this 1,000-kilometre front line to try and gauge the difficulties that Ukrainian forces are facing in the early stages of this counter-offensive. And this is our report. Russian forces have withdrawn from what remains of this part of the village. Its people have fled. A destroyed Ukrainian military vehicle is towed from the battlefield. Dead Russian soldiers in the grass. The Ukrainian military last week announced it had completely retaken the village of Storozheve, but that's not quite true. The crater you can see here is as a result of a Russian airstrike yesterday. The Ukrainian military are telling us that although they've cleared, so they say, the majority of this village, there is still ongoing fighting on the outskirts, and they say they are facing fierce resistance from Russian forces. Ukraine's counter-offensive was expected for months, and that gave Russian forces time to prepare.
They have strong air power and a lot of infantry supported by heavy artillery. They're moving slowly towards us, but we're killing them. We are conducting small offensive operations on the outskirts of the village along the forest line, but there are many mines.
Around 200 kilometers north, near the Russian-occupied town of Kreminna, barrage after barrage of artillery fire echoes through the forests. The Ukrainian soldiers here are nervous. Russian positions are a few hundred meters away. Ukrainian forces retook this area during a counter-offensive last summer. Neither side has made a major advance for months. But as the Ukrainian army began to probe for weakness in Russian defenses to the south, things here began to change.
Honestly, there is nothing good here. The situation is very tense.
The trench commander tells us to take cover because Russian helicopter gunships are in the area.
There is constant fire from mortars, artillery, helicopters, airstrikes and small arms. They assault our position in small groups. They are trying to break through to capture an important supply route.
Hard graft and early days, says Ukraine and its NATO backers. if there ever is a decisive breakthrough, it could take months. Charles Strafford, Al Jazeera, Eastern Ukraine.
Well, the southern city of Rostov-on-Don is about 1,100 kilometers from Moscow. The governor of the Lipetsk region in central Russia has said a Russian military convoy was on the